Kawede, welcome to Born Extinct, my journey to acknowledgement of my ancestors and authentic spiritual self. My name is Akakwa, and I was born extinct. The violence that accompanied colonization and the devastating effects on indigenous societies, cultures, and morality is well known. The matter that is least discussed is that colonization was the economy of food. Colonization brought capitalism to our country, and with it, its intention of naturalizing it to appear a normal event of historical progression by alienating traditional producers from their means of survival. The Cape was originally a settler community, making food production important for the European with a focus on passing ships and the export market and feeding their hungry masses in Europe. They arrived in the New World fully equipped with advanced weaponry, atop horses, but no food to nourish them. They found fertile grounds with agricultural plantations, with free labor, animals, and very healthy, happy people. The colonial found our indigenous food substandard. They believed that consuming inferior local foods would eventually cause them to become savages, just like us. In Europe, at the time, food also played an important role in forming social identities. The poor in Europe ate mostly barley, oats, rye, and vegetable broth. Some vegetables were classified according to social status. In some parts of Europe, the elite believed that their class entitled them to eat only from trees high from the filth of the ground, and that roots and bulbs were for the lower classes. Europeans believed that their constitution differed completely from that of indigenous and native people. In Spain, King Ferdinand V and Queen Isabella's Reconquista became a strong symbol of Spanish culture, forcing Muslims and Jewish people to prove that they were true Spaniards by forcing them to eat pork. By the time they arrived in the New World, Europe had been at war with itself for so long that it was unable to feed itself. They came to steal our food. They were starving in Europe after multiple periods of famine. Maize was central to the world economy and politics by 1492 and became the main food source for the poor and powerless across the world. Maize facilitated the transatlantic slave trade, colonization in Africa, and the overthrow of feudalism in Europe. Maize arrived in South Africa in the early 1700s and is produced in all provinces, but it has significant producing regions in the Free State, Gauteng, Mpumalanga, and the Northwest. Maize created incredible wealth for European landowners, shopkeepers, money lenders, and the new middle class, while it decreased life expectancy for the poor. During the slave trade, maize was used to prepare stolen people for the long transatlantic journey ahead, resulting in African American labor at first developing a love-hate relationship with corn, and the name slave maize came into existence. The invader imported foreign seeds, herds of sheep, goats, cows, and pigs, which were allowed to roam free, consuming vast lands of indigenous foods grown by the locals for winter. With the overabundance of grazing land and no natural enemies, these foreign animals multiplied rapidly. As a result, Meat consumption increased as it was no longer a luxury item as it was at home in Europe. The release of these plants and animals on the new terrain acted like biological weapons, obliterating much of the indigenous fauna and flora, causing widespread destruction of plants and animals and spreading disease. The lack of management of these alien plants caused soil erosion, destruction of wildlife and plant diversity, and climate change. Indigenous farmers fought a bitter battle for the control of their land. Production was expanded to meet foreign markets. At first, many indigenous people became malnourished from the new diet. It weakened our systems to European diseases, while others starved and their crops were trampled and their land appropriated. The arrival of women in the Cape and the reunification of families was the destruction of the indigenous household. Indigenous women were forced into domestic servitude, roles as wet nurses, cooks, nannies, and taught to cook European cuisine. European women were set to set an example of how civilized women behave, and much of what was defined as a civilized woman was what happened in the kitchen. Within a short period of time, large plantations came under the control of those profiting from international trade, and production was directly tied to the European food demands. The large-scale consumption of meat and the commodification of animals is a direct consequence of colonization. Through this commodification and the practice of dairying is where we see the most remarkable biological resistance to food and lactose tolerance. Indigenous populations from traditionally non-milking groups in Africa and the Pacific has a low lactose tolerance. Between 63 and 94% of adults in this group cannot consume dairy without discomfort, while prevalence of the conditions remain quite low in the European settler. South African fruits and vegetables are very nutritious. A person can survive for up to 6 months exclusively on the tama fruit. Mature fruits can be stored for long periods and the flesh can remain intact for up to 1 year after being separated from the parent plant. Indigenous Key Apple, also known as wild apple or Dingaan's apricot, is found in forests in the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal and Limpopo. The wild plum or monkey orange, maruka, mabola fruit, plum, are also some of the most important fruits in South Africa. Cleome, also known as blackjacks, cat whiskers, African cabbage, are found in all provinces of South Africa. The Jew's mallow is a vegetable also known as wilde yuta, klele, and is found in KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, Eastern Cape and Mpumalanga. Monkey orange, also known as kwakwa or umhlali, found in the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo. Ripe fruit is eaten and preserved. Indigenous people's knowledge and food systems are fast disappearing, but are important in coping with diverse ecosystems to challenge the global environment. Decolonization of our diets refer to a food movement to reclaim traditional diets through consuming indigenous foods of South Africa, and a return to a plant-based foods of the pre-colonial period and rejecting the cheap, convenient, processed foods with sugar and added fats. The decolonized diet, therefore, is reclaiming a culture of consuming foods that our bodies are adapted for. and eating foods that are readily available in abundance in nature. Restoring indigenous plant foods is necessary for healing of colonial trauma and unhealthy attitudes to foods learned through Western institutionalization of food. Until recently, the English refused to eat potatoes, calling it Irish foods. Cultural bias against peasant crops were unfortunate because poor people grow robust, productive and self-reliant foods suitable to feed the most vulnerable in society. Sadly, such historical exclusionary trends continue. Around 3,000 indigenous African roots, leaves, bulbs, stems, and fruit and vegetables are still consumed in Africa. Indigenous people all over the globe live in harmony with nature, in integrated cultures that are independent and self-reliant. Humans need to reconnect with nature in the intimate way that indigenous people did to ensure our survival and reclaim indigenous crops as a source of protection against modern diseases. We need to reconnect with our ancestors and indigenous knowledge. Food needs to be a vehicle for taking back our identities. Kai Gagangs for your time, Cape of Storms, Table Bay, Falls Bay, Cape of Good Hope, Settler. It was not yours to take. My name is Atakwa, and I was born extinct. See you next time.